So this is more like, I used to do this series called Live Coding. It was on YouTube and like Justin TV, rest in peace. And this is kind of like that. So I'm gonna show you some stuff, and at any time, interrupt me, ask questions, because if you have a question about something, there's probably some other people in the room who will also have that question. So we're going to build an Android app. And we're going to build an app based on the website Slack. Has anyone ever used Slack? The IRC for Teams, only modern. It's really cool. It's really great. So we're going to build a Xamarin Forms app. So, but first, I want to show you how to use Starter Mobile. So it's kind of like this like template, but not like a building in your own template into the IDE is not so easy at the moment. So we're going to make a dummy one. And so how it works is you're going to git clone github.com my cool app. Let's do it. Cool. And so there's two templates that come in Starter Mobile. There's one built around if you're using native iOS and Android. And so it's built around this pattern of the PCL shared library. So we're not using the shared projects feature. We're using portable class libraries. Let me bump this one. Let's make it a little bigger. So we've got the shared portable class library. We'll have an iOS app and we'll have an Android app. And so there's another template called Xam Forms. And Xam Forms sets up Xamarin.forms for you. So we're going to use that one. And the way we do that is we go git, like I said, hard. Cool. So the name of all these projects are starter. You probably don't want to call your app starter. So we've got this cool trick where we go script, create my cool app. We ignore that message. And now we've got my cool app.solution. It renamed all the files. It renamed all the content in the files. So now you've got like something to start off. And if I go start. We're going to restore some packages, which I don't want to do. But anyway, the idea is that it's set up a bunch of libraries for you that we use. I call this building apps the GitHub way. And so the GitHub way is to use functional reactive programming. So in C#, that's through this library called Reactive UI that I wrote. So originally only Reactive UI existed, and the Mac guys at GitHub liked it so much they ported the entire thing to Objective-C. Because they really like Objective-C, but they also like Reactive UI. So they wrote Reactive Cocoa. And so they're really the same library. They're like kind of two faces of the same coin. They're intentionally similar. So if you know one, you kind of know the other. Which is really cool because we had some developers on the Mac team start working on the Windows app, and they didn't know any C#, but they knew Reactive Cocoa. And so that was the hard part to learn, and they learned it really quickly. Anyway, it was cool. So this kind of sets you up with like an iOS app that starts up, opens a dummy page, and an Android app. And it also sets up this library that I've also written called Akavash, which is a made-up word, so you can pronounce it any way you want. Which is really cool because it lets you save and load state in this really convenient way. In a portable way too. So you can save and load state in your PCL, and then under the hood it will load up SQLite and then set it up for you. So let's start up the iOS version because the bugger goes faster. So when it boots up, it shows this screen, which is the state serialization test. And so one of the cool things that I'm going to show a lot later is that Reactive UI helps you with saving and loading your state if your app gets killed. So On iOS, this is pretty important. On Android, it's super important. You can't not do this. If your app, if they rotate the screen, if they change the language, if they do anything, your app is unloaded. And so you have to save what you're doing so that when it gets reloaded, it'll come back. Reactive UI helps you out with this, and we'll see more about that later. And so the idea is if you see the same GUID, then you know your app state got saved. If you see a different one, you know it got created from scratch. That's kind of just a boring, like, delete this page, please, but it's a little bit more useful than hello world. So that's cool. Let's forget about that. So I'm going to Julia Child this a little bit, and then open up a project I've already created. And so what we're going to do is I've stepped back in time by git checkout a whole bunch of things. And every commit, and so this is a public repo. I'll give you the link at the end. Every commit is like a slide. So we're going to go through, and we're going to see building this app from the beginning. We've started with a dummy project. And now we're going to, basically the only thing we've done is add a bunch of NuGet packages. And so we're going to go through some stuff. So let's check this first. This is actually, a lot of the stuff in this presentation is brand new. Like, just got it working, a month ago, especially around the routing stuff, which I'm really excited to show today. So it's really cool. It's really cool because it solves a lot of problems in a general way that would normally be really annoying around saving state in your application. So this is the entirety of the platform-specific code in this app. And it's entirely boilerplate, which is super cool. We're going to add a little bit more platform-specific code, but it's also super boring. So the cool thing is, Reactive UI has this feature called Auto-Suspend Helper. And the job of Auto-Suspend Helper is to save and load exactly one object. You only get one. When your app gets shut down for some reason. So that's really general. It means you can put whatever you want as this object. It's not tied to any specific anything. You could choose whatever you want. That object can be really big and interesting, and we're going to make it really big and interesting. Because we're going to make it like the view model for our app, and we're going to call that app Bootstrapper. Yeah. So the idea is that here we're describing how to create a new app state. So if we try to load it from disk and it's not there because they just installed the application or the application crashed or something, this is how to create a new one from scratch. And it's just like return new. And we're going to set up default suspend resume. Now on iOS, this saves to a JSON file in your local like bundle. On Android, it uses the bundle passed into onCreate, basically. But you don't have to know any of that, and it's super cool that you don't. So what else? So App Bootstrapper is just a class you can create. It's like the view model for the application. That's not like the application isn't a view, but you can think of it as like kind of like the thing that we're going to hold all our stuff in. So it's got a few things in it. It's got this object called a router, and a router is the way we do in Reactive UI. Reactive UI is an MVVM framework, and one of the things that many MVVM frameworks provide is view model-based routing. So I say, like, navigate to this view model, and we're going to look up a view associated with it, which is cool because that means routing can be portable. It means I can say, like, in my PCL, I can say, go to this page. And then the platform-specific stuff will say, oh, you actually mean this iPhone page. Hold on a second. It also means you can test routing. You can say, like, if I put in username and password and then hit the OK button, we should end up on the foo page. That's really important. So App Bootstrapper is where we put a lot of our portable like startup code. Anything we can do to like set up things here means we don't have to write it twice or 3 times to set it up on iOS, Android, Windows Phone. So that's cool. And so we set up this object called router, which is essentially the backstack, like the stack of view models that we're going to move forward and back in. And we set up this library that's really cool, that it's super like under-advertised, in my opinion, called Fusillade, which is a synonym for volley. Volley is an Android library that I totally stole a bunch of ideas from and ported to C#. So the idea is that we want to be super sloppy with our network connections and make as many as we want. And we're going to, we're going to let this library kind of fix it for us. And it fixes it by saying, like, there will only be 4 network requests in flight at the same time. And this constant is from volley, and you can change it if you want. It will also say things like, if you make 20 requests to the same image, like, for example, if you're writing a Twitter app, and you have like an avatar page, each tile might try to load, or a message page, each tile might try to load an avatar, right? And then you make 20 requests to the same picture. Fusillade recognizes this and dedupes it. So you only make 1 request, and then 20 people get the result, which is cool. And so what we're doing here is we're setting up so that but Fusillade eventually has to make requests, real network requests. And so we're setting it up so that we're going to use modern HTTP client to make those requests, which is a library that also is an HTTP message handler that makes it so that you can use HTTP client, which is this portable library, and the result goes to these platform-specific libraries that have way better performance. NSURL session on iOS and OKHTTP on Android. So the advantage is that on iOS, if you use HTTP client and make a bunch of requests, you create a thread per request. And so if you get more than like 5, your app is toast. Like, it's going to go very slow. And that doesn't happen on iOS with modern HTTP client. So that's cool. We don't want that to happen. It's also way better at canceling requests, which is super important. If you move away from a page, you need to cancel all the outstanding requests that are in flight, or else you're wasting bandwidth. You're stopping the user from downloading the thing they want to look at because you're too busy downloading these other things that are unimportant. So we set this up. So in this project, I've marked everything interesting with the tag cool stuff. So if you grep for it, you'll find all the things that I want to call out and are like interesting parts of this application. So if you end up digging through the source later, grep for cool stuff. NB should be cool stuff instead of NB. And so in Xamarin Forms, we have to describe, we have to hand off the first page we want to load. And so the platform-specific code is going to look and try to load that main page. So we have this method create main page. This main page is going to use this class called routed view host, which is basically going to create a navigation page in Xamarin Forms, which on iOS is the UI navigation view controller. On Android, it's actually like a weird view host that like shuffles in views. You don't have to know that. It's magic. And so routed view host is going to watch our router for changes to the view model list. And then if somebody pushes a new view model, it's going to load up that page. So it just kind of does a bunch of stuff for us. This is kind of boilerplate too, if you're using the template. Like, you don't have to worry about this. This will always be return new view routed host. Cool. So let's step back one. So the first thing I like to do whenever I'm writing a mobile app is create kind of like the model level, like the model and the network stuff. And so I don't know if everyone knows about this, but there's this website called JSON-to-C#.com. You dump in a JSON block, and it creates these classes for you, and you didn't have to type it out. It's amazing. It's super useful. You kind of have to fix it up a little bit. Like, if the JSON blob you dumped in had a null in it, it doesn't know what type to assign it because there's no types. JavaScript, no types. No, it's no types. That's terrible. Anyway. But it saves you a ton of time. It's so easy to map like web APIs with JSON and C#. Highly recommend. So let's step forward one. So here, I'm using this library called refit. Refit is a library I wrote that is a port of Jake Wharton's library, retrofit. It's super cool. So what it lets you do is you create an interface. It's for creating like clients to web APIs, and saves you a ton of time. You create an interface, this iSlack API, and you just describe methods you want to call. And in that, you add a tag called like post or get, and then each parameter gets sent as an item in the query. And there's all kinds of flexibility of like, put it as a header, you can make it as the body, and the return result will be deserialized from JSON objects. So the objects we created in the previous slide. It saves you a ton of time. Unfortunately, right now, it only works on Android or desktop because it uses Castle Core. In the future, it will work on 64-bit Xamarin.iOS, not 32-bit because of some build things. So that's really cool. It saves a lot of time. Now, the Slack API is super weird because the way that they do things is you have to send the data as a form post. So this is not as pretty as it could be. It looks much better. You should check out the sample. It sends it as a form post and then returns JSON. I don't know of any other API that does that. It's actually really bad because then you can't use gets because form posts can't put a form post in a get, and now you can't use cache control, which is not ideal. So what we're going to do is that I don't want to use this raw API because it looks ugly. So we're going to create some extension methods that just do some silly things like wrap some nice parameters in a dictionary, and then call the method. So now the cool thing about this is an interface, so I can create a dummy version and use it for testing, use it for mock objects. It's super easy. So we've created our model. Like our model, in my mind, like MVVM, the M in most mobile apps is like network stuff, caching stuff, like immutable wire, like JSON off the wire. So we keep typing. We're going to keep going. So Slack is a little interesting in how you log in. So their login part is kind of this two-step process. You give them an email, and then they hand you back a list of teams this email is associated with. So like you can be part of more than one group. You could be like part of your work group, and you could be part of your like some friends who like have like some IRC or some chat room set up. And so we need to get a list of teams. We're going to put in an email, and we're going to get a list of teams that we're going to display to the user. So we're going to create this up. We're going to create a view model. It's going to be derived from reactive object, which is the view model object in reactive UI that you use for any view model. It's also going to derive from this interface called iRoutable view model, which means that this interface, or this object, this view model is intended to be like routed to, like it's a page in your app. So we decorate all these things with data contract and ignore data member and stuff because we know that when our app gets shut down, when somebody rotates the screen, when somebody like closes our app and we run out of memory, we're going to save this view model to disk. And so we got to make sure that it serializes properly. And so you should write some tests that round trip every view model to make sure that it's really tricky to get right. Any questions so far? We're getting past the boring part, and then we're going to get to the interesting part. Super boring. You can throw like tomatoes at me. Boo, boo, boo. We don't want to see boilerplate startup. So the two things that routable view model requires are the host screen, which you just pass in the constructor, and this field called URI path segment, which is a terrible name, and I can't change it because of ABI compatibility. But it really means the title that's going to be displayed on the navigation bar or on the action bar on Android. Cool. So this is what a read-write property looks like in reactive UI. This is how you declare like a property that notifies when it changes. This is always boilerplate. So in other frameworks like Calibre and Micro or MVVM Lite, you might write some extra like raise property changes in the setter. We never do that in reactive UI. We always just write this the same way every time. And in the constructor, we're going to just describe how properties are related. We haven't gotten to any RX stuff yet, because it's all in the constructor. So we've got an email address. We've got a command to load the team list. So it's going to take the email address, call out to the Slack API, and then pull back a list of teams that this person is on. And we've got here a list, a reactive list, which is like an observable collection, but can do a lot of cool stuff. So you can think of it as just a list. It's a list that can tell you when things change. So you can say like list, like team list.items added, and then I can subscribe to whenever anyone adds anything to this list and do something based on it, or like items removed, or like all this stuff. So it's just a list of login team tile view models. And so I like to call any item in a list a tile, like the view for that item in a list. That's kind of a convention that I use, but you don't have to. So in reactive UI, everything interesting happens in the constructor. So we're going to describe how this object is laid out, or how this UI is laid out in this really like from top to bottom, like from inputs to outputs kind of flow, which is really cool because we can write kind of the entire interaction of this dialogue in one place and be really succinct. So this is the first thing, which is cool. This line right here. Zoom out a little bit. So we've got this command called load team list, but it can't be executed all the time. If we don't have an email address, we can't call load team list. So instead of writing a function can execute, we're going to describe how can execute is related to other properties in this view model. And the way that we're going to do that is creating an observable of booleans. And so when that boolean says true on next, then we're going to say, oh, we can execute this command. When it's false, then we can't execute this command. So we're going to take a property and turn it into an observable. We're going to turn it into an event, a stream of changes. How many people have used RX before? How many people have never used RX before? And you're like, what is he talking about? Lots of people. Okay. So what I can do here, the main method of iObservable is like an event. An event that you can just assign to a variable, and you can combine with other events. And so that's really cool. So the main thing we can do is subscribe to it. So we can say like x I can't console write line in a PCL. Daniel placed it. That's all right. So the idea is that x is a bool. Like it's going to change yes or no depending on whether the email is empty or not empty. So I'm saying when any of the email or the email changes, there's only one, I'm going to select it into whether it's null or white space, whether it's not null or white space. So if it's true, it's not null or white space. If it's false, it's null or white space. We can't use it. And so the cool thing about that is that it means that your UI is going to be really responsive because it's only going to update the things that it needs to, exactly the things that it needs to. So you don't see a whole bunch of items re-layout and re-render. Layout and rendering is really expensive, especially in mobile. So we want to avoid it and do it as little as possible. So we're only going to update when we know the email has changed. So we we've related when the button is enabled to the email address. And we've done that in a declarative way. So that's really cool. So like every MVVM framework, reactive UI comes with an iCommand implementation. Our iCommand is way different and way cooler because it knows about asynchronous operations. So it knows about this notion of almost every interesting command will do something in the background, calculate some stuff, do a web request, come back with some result, and then probably stuff it in some other parameter. And so reactive UI helps you out with this. So we create an async task command. This is when this can execute. And so the nice thing about this command is that it will only let you get into this block once, meaning that as soon as this starts executing, when we're going to do the actual work, we're going to disable the button. Oh, question. Do we have a question? Nope. Never mind. Sorry, I misheard. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue. Questions, comments, concerns, rants, raves? Cool. Let's continue. So our command's really cool. It knows about background operations, which is super useful. So it disables that button when the command is running it. It stops you from, like, if somebody jumps on that button 5 times, it's not going to make 5 web requests and then get all confused as they all come back in weird order. That just doesn't happen. And so we're going to take this, and this is our code to actually make this web request. And so this is the API from Fuselage, how you set it up. In the HTTP client, you pass in one of these constants, and you can override them. You can make them do whatever you want. So there's different constants. So the two you should use, really, are background and user initiated. We want to say that requests that go on in the background aren't as important as ones that the user directly initiated, because they're waiting. So we want to say that requests that are user initiated should jump the line. They shouldn't wait in the back of the line behind all the background requests. So we're going to say this is user initiated. We're going to have our base address of slack.com. And then here's where we use refit to pass in this Slack. We're going to pass in this interface. It's going to create a class for us that implements this interface. And that class is going to use HTTP client. And then we're going to call our method getTeamsForUsers and await it. And so our return value is a list of available teams. We're going to check to see if something bad happened. And if it did, we're going to throw an exception. No teams for this account. Maybe they've never signed up for Slack, or something went wrong. And we're going to turn the list of users. So we set up what to do in the background. Now, if we look at the type of this is a reactive command of list of team with user. That's a weird type. So the idea is that our command is itself an event. We can subscribe to it. And the contents of the event, the onNext, is going to be the result of that asynchronous method. So it's like this stream of constantly coming back lists of teams, which is super convenient for us because we're going to take that stream and then dump it into this list. So we've got this team list. The other thing that happens is this stream is guaranteed to come back on the UI thread. So you don't have to, even though this thing happened in the background, you don't have to marshal it. It does it for you. So we're going to clear the existing team list. We're going to take all these items, select them into view models. We have a list of models. We're going to select them into a list of view models. This is just link. This time is going fast, going way too fast. So reactive command also has this feature called thrown exceptions. So if anything bad happens in that block, which often will because it's making network requests, there are all kinds of things bad that can happen. You don't have a network connection, they typed in a weird password, whatever. Like the API is down. All of those exceptions, instead of being thrown, are going to go to this observable called thrown exceptions. This event. Every time we throw an exception, we're going to show this thing. We're going to subscribe to that and then use this API in reactive UI called user error. which is like user errors are ways to throw, they're kind of like exceptions, but they are for exceptions that are intended to be shown to the user. So it's kind of like you can think of user error.throw as like pop a dialog box. So we set it up so that we call load team list. It'll do all this stuff, and it'll dump it into a list. That's pretty cool. And so the last thing that we do is we say that whenever the email changes, there has to be at least 1 second of dead air. So if they're typing, we're going to ignore it until they stop typing for at least 1 second. When that happens, if I can, invoke load team list. So we're typing, we wait 1 second. If load team test can't execute is true, then we're going to call that execute. Cool. And so our tile is going to be a list of buttons, basically. Because we're going to like have a list of things to log into, and you can pick that one.
Well,
Sorry.
Why do you need to specify the main thread scheduler?
The question is,
You're doing that already.
yeah, so the question is, why do you have to show main thread scheduler here? So Throttle uses timers, so it actually has something going on in the background. And so because to fire timers, we have to do something on a different thread, we have to choose either like a testable thread, or we can use the main thread scheduler. And so if I use a testable thread, the invoke command would happen on a background thread. And I don't want that to happen. And it's not efficient because the main thread scheduler just says like, oh, I'll just wait until, like, I'll just put a to-do, like, when the clock hits this time, then run this thing. Cool. We've gone a long time without, like, actually seeing something cool, so we're going to go a little further. So let's make one more view model. We're going to make the actual login. So the login is, we already know the email. The team that they want to log into, that's our model. We're going to have a command called login, and it's going to return a token. That's our data that we're going to get back. So we give the login, the username, the email, and the password, and we're going to get back a token. This API is not public. I may have reverse engineered it. It's fine. So we're going to do something really similar in our async task. We're going to create an HTTP client, call Slack. We're going to call the login method with our user ID, our team ID. These are all from the thing you picked in the previous screen, and the password. So if the result is not OK, we're going to blow up. We can only execute this when we have a password. Same deal. Cool. And so we're going to do the same thing with the user errors. User errors are kind of like exceptions meant for users. And then the nice thing is that we can throw them in our view model that's portable. We can catch them in our views and display like a message. And so it means that we can portably say like something bad happened, and then our views we can deal with what the result is. And this is a really like sloppy use of this. The API actually lets us say responses. We can say like, oh, they said like try it again, or they said I don't want to do this, like cancel the operation kind of thing. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to like display like a dumb toast. So as I said, we're going to add the worst error handler in the world. Do not do this. Be friendly to your users. Don't just pop toasts at them. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to toast.makeText with the error message. We're going to run it for a while, and then just say give up, like cancel the operation. I'm trying to move fast because I want to get to the part where we actually see stuff. Until then, you don't believe that this works. Like, who knows? Like, this could just be like junk code, and like it's all a lie. So here so what, nuke the test view. So I think here's where we actually create a view. Let's skip that one. There we go. Wire up some views for starting login. Oh, thank God. OK. So here we're going to write some XAML. It's pretty standard. So reactive UI comes with its own binding framework, its own way to do binding, which is, in my opinion, way better than XAML-based binding because it's type safe. If you make a typo, it breaks the build. So that's cool. We're going to see that. So the unique thing in here is that instead of using bindings for the most part, we're going to use one here because we're inside the data template, but whatever. We're going to give things names. And so in the constructor of our view, we're going to do a few special things. We're going to declare this page as iView for login start view model, because this is the login start view. And then this code is super boilerplate. It's like the way to declare a bindable property. Like you just copy paste it. It's super boring. It's in every view. There's no way to like create a subclass because you can't, just like in WPF or Windows Phone, you can't create a generic subclass that has a XAML page associated with it, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. This is the cool part. So implementing iView4 gives you these cool methods, one-way bind and bind command. And so it lets us relate the view model to the view in this way that is refractor friendly and type safe. So that's cool. So we set up this view. This is the start where we're going to bind the team list to item source. We're going to bind the email to a text box, and it's going to be two-way because we've got to type in it. And then the same kind of deal, this is a tile. Yeah. So I don't remember if this actually works, but let's give it a go. So any questions while this contemplates its position in life? Building. We're using the new Android player, which is super cool. It's still thinking about it? Is it thinking about it? It's running. What's the deal? Yep.
I know that you have a reactive list adapter pre-built. Do you have one for the in Android for the spinners and things? Or do we just have to make those our custom ourselves?
You can make them yourselves. Reactive command exposes a property that helps you out to like really easily bind to a spinner, to the visibility of a spinner to show where it's, because you can know it has a property called is executing. And that's an observable Boolean. It's a Boolean event that goes up and down when it's running. And so that's super easy to bind to a spinner.
Yeah, we built one. I just didn't know if we were recreating the wheel because I didn't see anything. I just didn't know if you had one.
This player is like completely hung. Like it's not doing anything. Oh, what a troll. Okay, so let's kill this. Let that contemplate its light. Let's see what. Let's jump to a place where I know it's gonna build something good. So we've created the login view and the login start view. And so the idea is that in MVVM, we're saying that UI toolkits, they don't think about testability at all. We can't test views. It's too hard. It just doesn't work right. You have to like set up these weird environments. The dispatcher doesn't run in a test runner. And so we're going to say we want to make the view code as boring and mechanical as possible so that it's super obvious that it's right or wrong. And so there will be no thought when we write these views. Because we know we can't test them, we're going to move all the interesting code into this object called a view model that we can test and run a test runner because it's just a dumb object. We can just create one. And so that's the idea, is that these views are super boring by design. All right, let's get this going. Unlock. Yes. Okay, here we go. So at the bottom, we've got this enter your email address to log in. I'm going to foo@bar.com. It's an invalid email. So now we're going to try cool. And so now there's a list of buttons, but this fake account that I created only has one team. Now we're back to the same page. I need to step forward one. OK, so that's the idea, even though it didn't actually work. Demo fail. What's the deal? So let's go to login start view model. Navigate to new login start view model to our same page. We want new login view model. Run it, spin, spin, spin. Login is fake Paul Betts. And cool, so it worked. We don't have anything page past this yet. So, but if I type in like a bum password, you say couldn't log in, check your password. So cool. The dream is live. Here we go. And so that's the idea, is that we want our views to be super boring and do nothing interesting. And we want our view models to have all the cool stuff. So this is the code for login view. It's the same idea. So it implements IView4. We're going to one-way bind the model.user to the email text, which isn't actually email, but whatever. We're going to two-way bind the password. And then we're going to bind command login, the view model login command, to the view login command. And the rest of this is just the same boring boilerplate that you just copy paste everywhere with different types. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to skip to the end. Yep. So once we wire that all up, we also wire up some caching. So we cache the result of the team list, so that if they enter the same thing, you get it again. And then we wire up a view model to actually join a room. And so you can view through the commits in the repo. It's policybets/Xamarin evolve. And so this is kind of the final end result, like if everything works. Let's cross our fingers. The same dumb bug. So I try to make each of these commits really clear and interesting. They're kind of like the commits are like a slide, and so in doing so, I like broke the app, which is not ideal. And then I broke Xamarin Studio. It's also not ideal. Let's just call it. You guys can run the app on your own. We have 9 seconds for questions. So talk quickly. Yep, in the back.
Do you do anything special to make the XAML to still write the background g.cs code when you create a new XAML file the way it does normally?
Yep, yeah. So Xamarin Forms writes like a secret background file that like creates fields for all the elements you gave names to. But you don't see that. It just happens in the background. And then your code behind is something different. Yeah, so it works almost exactly the same as like Microsoft XAML in that sense. It works for Xamarin.Mac. It doesn't work for the open one. You can make it work with the open one if you build the source, but yeah. So the default one works with Xamarin.Mac. Reactive UI works on Xamarin.Everything. It works on WinRT. It works on WPF Desktop. It works on Windows Phone 8, 8.1. What else am I missing? Is that all of them? I think. Not on Xbox yet. They won't give me the SDK. So, cool. Anything else? All right. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you think of them later. My email is paul@paulbetts.org, or like hit me up on Twitter @paulcbetts. The repo is paulcbetts/Xamarin Evolve. And so you can run it, you can download it. Every commit is super interesting. So go through the history and look at the commits, because the commits are like pieces of the app, which is why the app is broken, because I had to constantly re-edit commits to make it look like I made every commit perfectly. When I totally didn't. It's a total lie. Git rebase interactive. Like, you can fiddle with commits all you want. So, cool. All right, thank you so much for your time.